The journey of Sega through the 8-bit era has to be one of the most interesting stories in console history. What is just a footnote to some actually had one heck of a ride through multiple revisions, regional successes, a computer variant, a handheld, and a game library that half the world didn't even know about. The real beginnings of the Master System started all the way back in 1983 with the Japanese release of the Sega SG-1000. It was powered by an NEC 780C, a derivative of the 8-bit Z80A running at 3.5 MHz. Texas Instruments provided the graphics and sound chip for what was a fairly competent piece of kit for its time. It got off to a strong start and sold decent numbers, but was quickly squashed by the Japanese Famicom. That same year, Sega also attempted to market a computer based on this technology called the SC-3000. Like many computers of the time, the hardware is built into one unit with the keyboard, and it supported multiple expansions. It failed to create very much momentum itself, leaving Sega needing to make some changes if it wanted to catch Nintendo's runaway success. They attempted to push out a new model called the SG-1002 the following year, changing the design of both the console itself as well as its controller. The internals remained the same, however, and the Famicom continued to garner the lion's share of the Japanese consumer. At this point, Sega had been basically experimenting with the console market, seeing what gamers wanted and making little changes and corrections along the way. In 1985, Sega then released its Mark III in Japan. This time they made the decision to not only change some of the physical characteristics, but also make the important upgrades to the technical specs as well. Still based on the 8-bit Z80A CPU, Sega used a vastly upgraded video chip from Texas Instruments. The hardware now had more RAM, was capable of more color, and was an overall massive improvement on the original design. The Sega Mark III would be released in other territories as the Master System, a console that would be met with mixed success during its retail run. In Japan, the Famicom would continue its stranglehold. In North America, the Nintendo Entertainment System did the same. In a number of European nations and PAL territories, the Master System found solid footing and sold extremely well, in some cases even better than the NES. In Brazil, Sega partnered with a company called Tectoy to handle their hardware and software, leading to a success story that continues to this very day. To say that the Master System's run was complicated is an understatement, and that's why we are firing up the time machine one more time to see if we can make the moves needed to bring this hardware the success it so rightfully deserves. As in previous episodes, I want to stress that this is all for fun and for sharing thoughts and opinions of the era. Nothing here should be taken as anything more than that. We will be traveling back to 1984, right before the Mark III makes its debut. Can we turn around its fortunes? Let's find out. One thing that must be done before the Mark III ever launches in Japan, Sega needs to open itself up fully to third-party support. At this time, Sega saw its home market as a means to sell the software it created. It wasn't so keen on the idea of what it considered its competition using its hardware to make their games. In fact, Sega would publish nearly every single game released for the Japanese Mark III during its run. Another factoid that not many people know is that in Japan, cartridge games would not be released for the Mark III until 8 months after its launch there. Everything before then was released on Sega cards that were often months apart. This has to change as soon as possible in our new timeline. Sega must create a licensing program for third parties to support the Mark III as strongly as possible. This is 1985 and Nintendo hasn't yet begun to wrap up third-party support into unbreakable contracts forbidding them to make games for other systems. Sega must absolutely head this off where they can and court as many third parties as possible, even if it means aggressive reductions in licensing fees. Sega must also be prepared to create their own versions of popular franchises through deals with potential new third parties. The aim is to get not only a healthy library of Sega properties onto the device, but to also gather as many software makers together as possible to create more. With home computers starting to really take hold as gaming devices, one of my moves would be to go after software creators and publishers there and try and get their games on board the Mark III. Many of the software houses creating games for the MSX, the C64, and the Atari 8-bit line should easily be able to port and create a ton of games for us. This strategy can be used in every major territory, not just Japan, which means we should see a number of popular computer games look and run even better on our hardware. There's no reason we can't get games like The Way of the Exploding Fist for our machine. Imagine getting Electronic Arts on board and getting a Sega Master System port of Starflight. We could get LucasArts on our team early and start a long and fruitful relationship. If Nintendo is going to work their bullshit business practices, we need to look for games in places that will give us some potential big hits. We aren't going to get everyone we want. We aren't going to completely break the Nintendo juggernaut. But if we start early, look in the right places, and work diligently, we can do much better than we did before. The technology that powers the Mark III is quite something for 1985 gamers. The CPU is plenty powerful, the amount of color it can display is impressive, and if I changed the audio chip in the thing, I likely would be strung up by some crazed fan and never heard from again. With that said, there are still a number of changes that must happen before the Mark III makes its Japanese debut. The very first thing we are doing is removing the Sega card slot. These little beauties are cool, but ultimately no help to our long-term strategy. The storage is too small and the available software too limited to be worth the extra cost of manufacturing. To maintain backwards compatibility with the SG-1000 MyCard titles, we will release a cartridge adapter for $20, basically an updated card catcher that was available on the SG-1000. This will not be an issue outside of Japan since the SG-1000 wasn't released in many other territories. Our second change is to do something that may be superficial to some, but we will be moving the pause button off the console itself and putting it on the controller where it belongs. We would label this button Start, though it would also have other functions as well. It's a small thing, but I think it was initially a design choice that didn't make much sense even at the time. Our final hardware change is something that I think will benefit all software going forward. Along with a start button being added to our pad, we will also be making the big addition of a third action button. We will now have 1, 2, and 3 on our controller, giving us more actions to pull off at our fingertips. In Shinobi, you will now have a dedicated magic. In Black Belt, you will have a dedicated jump. Double Dragon gets its own button for jump as well. I always felt Nintendo's controller had an advantage with its 4-button layout. We will correct that issue here with an exclusive design of our own. The original Japanese launch wasn't the best for the Mark III. It was released in October of 1985 and Sega had next to no software for it. What it did have were on Sega cards, so they were small games that didn't really show off the true power of the device. Sega also came in at roughly a $150 price point at a time when the Famicom was cheaper, had more games, and had captured most of the Japanese market share. This is not a good spot to be in because if we delay, Nintendo goes unchallenged, but if we launch, we clearly do not have the games ready to show off our device. We need a shift in strategy that deals with this unfortunate circumstance. Our best path forward is to split the difference and give our software team some extra time to upgrade a few SG-1000 hits to add to our library. We will push the Mark III's Japanese launch to March of 1986, so we can port upgraded versions of Ninja Princess, Pitfall 2 Lost Caverns, Girl's Garden, Bomb Jack, and Doki Doki Penguin Land. We will move the Sega card releases to cartridge and offer them as 2-packs at attractive prices, similar to what was done in the West. This puts us much closer to our full cartridge releases like Fantasy Zone as well. Along with our new third-party approach, this should give us a lot more software to appeal to our audience. Since we will be making a few hardware modifications, we can also lower the price a bit. Along with our new release date, the Mark III will cost the yen equivalent of just $120 and come with 2 controllers. With a cheaper product, more games, and a better strategy, Japan should see a stronger launch with higher sales. Our next territory to launch is North America, and here we need a huge amount of changes to compete better. We are never going to wrestle this market away from Nintendo due to their scummy monopoly, but we can move more hardware and software units to be in a healthier position. The first thing we are going to do is leave the Mark III console design in place with a black and red molding. We don't need expensive R&D to redesign a console that looked better in the first place. I know the Master System's Western design has a ton of nostalgia, but I also thought the Mark III was a winner in that regard. I did like the look of the Western Master System controller, and the name, so those will stay in place with our new start and third action button. We will carry over our lower price from Japan as well, but we will need a compelling package to compete better. Our North American Master System will launch in November of 1986 for $130 and come with 2 controllers and the pack-in game Alex Kidd in Miracle World. We will also have a core pack that comes with 1 controller for $99. Part of my strategy here is to try and draw in gamers interested in a new console with an aggressive price and advertise the absolute hell out of it. At this time, television is the medium of choice, and we will make sure the entire country, East and West, will know what the Sega Master System is, what it costs, and what you get in the box. We will target the hours that run both children's programming as well as primetime shows the parents watch. Sega of America must do a better job of letting potential consumers know we exist and we have some great looking software. But television isn't our only option. We will also create an official Sega-based magazine that will release across the nation in every state. It will cover current games. It will preview future games. It will interview software makers. It will have strategy write-ups, cheat codes, contests, giveaways, and most importantly of all Master System owners will get a free 1-year subscription with their purchases. We will also work with cereal makers to include miniature versions of our Sega magazine in various breakfast foods. People love free gifts in their cereal boxes back then, and we'll take advantage of that. All this will go hand in hand with hopefully some new software from our home computer connections and a few more third parties we have recruited. It would also behoove us to offer competitive licensing fees. Nintendo's contracts prohibit third-party NES games to appear on other consoles, so we need to motivate those developers to make new software for us thanks to keeping a higher percentage of their take. Sega needs to play the long game in order to help combat these types of tactics. Lastly, but perhaps most importantly, we need to stay the course with the Master System and never turn it over for distribution by another entity. This product needs TLC to grow and thrive, and that's best done in our hands. Sadly, it should go without saying at this point, but all 3D games are cancelled. We need good games, not tech gimmicks, and those resources need to go to software development that will bolster our library. PAL regions are perhaps the biggest piece of the puzzle to get right here. We don't want to do anything of consequence that causes the Master System to do worse in those regions. Our best bet is to let Sega and its distributors go about the original plan with only the Mark III and controller redesigns being different. Sega had a sales strategy and marketing attitude that really helped it succeed there, and that needs to stay in place. The Master System launched in the summer of 1987 in many of these nations, and that works with our new gaming schedule just fine. We will keep things the same for Australia and New Zealand, plus our tech toy licensing program in Brazil. The Master System did fine there, and we need that success to help boost our chances elsewhere. With our changes, we have hopefully sold more hardware and software units during our first few years of the Master System's retail run. That begs the question of what to do with Sega's 16-bit hardware. The original Japanese Mega Drive released in 1988, which is far too soon to replace the Mark III if we have sold better numbers in Japan. We don't want to ruin any momentum or burn the goodwill with our new customers, so we will need some adjustments to the original strategy to compensate for our changes. Our best path is to move the Japanese launch of the Mega Drive back a bit to 1989, a few months before the North American launch of the Genesis. That gives our Mark III and Master System a better life cycle in those regions. We also get the side effect of additional R&D on our 16-bit console, allowing us to increase an important specification. The Mega Drive will now have a VDP capable of more colors. A better performing 8-bit market means that Sega has more room to better plan and react appropriately. Since this is a video about a better selling Master System, we will also make some changes to the form factor of the new 16-bit machine, so it has out-of-the-box backwards compatibility. We will opt for a cartridge slot that is keyed, so it will take both 8-bit Master System games as well as brand new 16-bit Genesis software. We need to market the new hardware as a consumer-friendly upgrade that will play all our existing games right out the box. No adapters and no extra cost. This will also allow 8-bit software to continue to flow even after the 16-bit machine takes its place. Master System software could have a complete value line that we aim at new Genesis owners at a very competitive price. There's no reason why a game like Shinobi can't be reissued in a new box promoting its dual compatibility for $20. Since there is no barrier of entry with adapters, this software should continue to be far more successful. We can also advertise that all of our controllers and other peripherals are cross-compatible. The Sega Light Phaser will be the light gun for the Mega Drive and Genesis, for example. We make this transition as painless as possible with a multi-pronged strategy of cross-compatibility. Our final leg of the new strategy is to adapt the Master System into a portable device in 1990. To start, we will be using a grayscale LCD to keep costs down, and we will also need a new backlight solution. Instead of the CCFL tube the original Game Gear had, we will go with electroluminescence technology similar to what was seen in wristwatches of the time. These do give off less light than a CCFL solution, but it distributes the light a lot more evenly and should consume much less power. We may even be able to drop down from 6 AA batteries to just 4. Because our LCD is now essentially black and white with a blue backlight, we no longer need the beefed up VDP redesign of the original Game Gear for a larger color palette. This new Game Gear will be base Master System tech top to bottom. We are also going to change the form factor of our Game Gear cartridges. We are bringing back the Sega My Card design for the Game Gear, not just for the eye-catching appeal of the package itself, but also because I want a card catcher too that will play Game Gear titles on both the Sega Genesis and Master System. Because of the nature of the technology, this device is essentially just changing the form factor of the cartridges. The idea here is to create an ecosystem of software that can be played on multiple devices. If we can create 3 healthy markets that can play one another's games, we certainly can move more units at retail. Since these consoles share a lot of similarities in terms of design, these add-ons should be incredibly inexpensive, adding to their appeal. So there we have it, my new plan for the Master System and how to improve its worldwide success. My main focus was to not impact its success in PAL regions or Brazil, while trying to make a real change in Japan and North America. The Master System needed more games in those regions, and I think going after computer developers as early as possible would yield us some impressive software. There were hundreds of games out there not developed in Japan, and not all of them were trash. Just imagine if Sega could have capitalized on the skin and blood of something like Barbarian the Ultimate Warrior in 1987. I think a healthy mix of games like The Last Ninja and Driller would have had some solid appeal as well. Third-party support was of paramount importance to a console's appeal. Sega needed a realistic route around the ironclad Nintendo contracts, and there were a ton of good games on other hardware to pull from. computers like the C64 and ZX Spectrum themselves had moved millions of units during the Master System's retail run. As a dedicated games machine with impressive color capabilities, I imagine many of these games could have been converted quite well to Sega's 8-bit powerhouse. That leaves us with only one question. What would you have done differently with the Master System? Let me know down in the comments what you think. I'm Sega Lord X. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you next time.